I adjusted my gray suit jacket as I sat at the main table in the grand ballroom of the Denver Grand Hotel, the soft glow of the chandeliers casting golden reflections on the crystal glasses and polished silverware. The air was filled with the murmur of conversations, laughter bubbling up from the guests as they toasted Evelyn and Thomas Carter's 35 years of marriage. The backdrop behind the head table read, 35 years of love, Evelyn and Thomas Carter, and photos of their life together flashed on a large screen. Jake Whitmore, 38 years old, sat quietly beside my wife Lana, their eldest daughter. My champagne glass was half full, untouched, mostly as I watched the room with a reserved smile. I wasn't one for small talk at these events. I preferred to blend in, letting Lana shine as she always did. Lana, on the other hand, was in her element. She looked stunning in her emerald dress, her laughter ringing out as she regaled the table with stories of her latest work projects, her friends' escapades, and those luxurious trips she loved so much. Not once did she mention me. It wasn't unusual. Over the years, I'd grown used to being the quiet supporter in the background. But tonight, something felt off. The way her eyes avoided mine, the subtle edge in her voice when someone brought up our life together. "Darling, you look so happy," Evelyn said loudly, drawing attention to us. Her voice carried across the table, warm and maternal. "Jake takes such good care of you, doesn't he? Marriage suits you both so well." Lana paused, her fork hovering mid-air. She glanced at me briefly, then let out a faint, almost mocking laugh. "Happy, Mom. You're imagining things a bit too much." Her tone was light at first, but there was an undercurrent that made my stomach tighten. Thomas, her father, frowned slightly, setting down his wine glass. "What do you mean by that, Lana?" She dropped her utensils with a soft clink, her expression shifting to something colder, more deliberate. "Why does everyone think my marriage is some fairy tale? Honestly, every day with Jake is just a regret. I wish I could end this nightmare already." The words hit me like a blade, slipping silently between my ribs. The table fell silent, the clinking of glasses from nearby guests suddenly distant. Evelyn's napkin slipped from her hand, and Thomas's face hardened in confusion. I could feel the eyes of the entire table on us relatives, friends, even a few strangers who'd overheard. My heart pounded, but I kept my face neutral, staring straight at Lana. She met my gaze for a second, her eyes defiant, as if daring me to react. Under the table, I discreetly pressed the record button on my phone, the device hidden in my pocket. I didn't know why I did it, instinct perhaps, but the weight of her words demanded it. They weren't just spoken in anger, they felt like a declaration, a finality. "Jake, say something," Evelyn exclaimed, her voice breaking the stunned quiet, her hand reaching out as if to bridge the gap. I took a slow breath, pushing back my chair and standing up. The room seemed to tilt slightly, but I steadied myself. "No need," I said calmly, my voice, even despite the storm inside. I turned to Lana, meeting her eyes one last time. "You want to end the nightmare? Fine. You won't have to endure it anymore." She raised an eyebrow, trying to maintain her composure, but I caught the flicker of uncertainty in her eyes, the brief widening under the chandelier lights. I grabbed my coat from the back of the chair, nodded politely to Evelyn and Thomas. "Thank you for the evening," and turned away. The ballroom's hush followed me as I walked out, footsteps echoing on the marble floor. Whispers started up behind me, but I didn't look back. Outside, the cool Denver evening air hit me like a wake-up call. I got into my car, gripping the steering wheel, replaying her words in my mind. Every day is a regret, and this nightmare. The pain was sharp, but beneath it something else stirred clarity. For 7 years, I'd loved her enough to stay silent about my own successes to avoid rocking the boat with her family. But tonight, that silence had shattered. I drove away from the hotel, the city lights blurring, as I headed toward the one place Lana had never known about, my private apartment downtown, where I kept my real work hidden. The recording on my phone was still running. I stopped it with a tap. This wasn't the end for me. It was the beginning of letting go. I drove through the Denver night, the city lights streaking past like forgotten memories. The sting of Lana's words echoed in my head. Every day is a regret. End this nightmare. But I pushed it down, focusing on the road ahead. My hands gripped the wheel tighter than necessary, the recording on my phone burning a hole in my pocket. I didn't head home. Instead, I veered toward the one place Lana had never set foot and never even asked about my private apartment downtown, a high-rise unit I'd rented under a shell company name. It wasn't just a hideaway, it was my sanctuary, my real office, where I built the life she knew nothing about. As I unlocked the door and stepped inside, the familiar scent of fresh coffee grounds and printer ink greeted me. The space was minimalist, a large desk dominating the living room covered in blueprints and financial spreadsheets. On the corner stood a detailed scale model of my latest real estate project, a commercial development I'd been quietly funding with $1.7 million in secured capital, all tucked away in accounts she had no access to. I flipped on the desk lamp, its warm light illuminating stacks of documents from Supply Logic, the software company I'd co-founded 5 years ago. What started as a side hustle in supply chain management had grown into something valued at over $15 million with clients across 3 states. But Lana Shi thought I was just an average IT guy clocking in at a mid-level job with a steady but unremarkable paycheck. She'd never probed deeper, never wondered why our finances always balanced without me dipping into her family's money, or why I sometimes worked late into the night. I sank into the leather chair, rubbing my temples. How had we gotten here? I remembered the early days vividly, like scenes from a movie I wished I could rewind. Lana and I met at a charity gala in Denver 7 years ago. She was the vibrant socialite daughter of Evelyn and Thomas Carter, old money from real estate dealings. I was the quiet engineer fresh off a startup gig, drawn to her energy like a moth to flame. She laughed at my jokes, said my grounded nature was a breath of fresh air compared to the flashy men in her circle. We married quickly, and for a while it was bliss. I loved her enough to downplay my ambitions to avoid the inevitable comparisons with her family's wealth. I kept Supply Logic under wraps, registering it solely in my name before our wedding, ensuring it remained separate property. Why rock the boat? I thought my silence was a gift, protecting our peace, letting her shine without the shadow of my success complicating things. But over time, cracks appeared. Lana's world revolved around brunches with high society friends, exotic trips she funded with her inheritance, and a growing disdain for anything ordinary. She'd laugh off my simple gestures, a homemade dinner after a long day, a bouquet of wildflowers from a roadside stand. "Jake, honey, that's sweet, but I need more excitement," she'd say, her eyes drifting to her phone, scrolling through photos of lavish vacations her friends posted. I swallowed it all, convinced my love could bridge the gap. I worked harder, in secret pouring profits back into the company, watching it thrive while our marriage withered. She never asked about my late nights at the office, assuming they were just overtime for a paycheck that barely impressed her. In her eyes, I was reliable, but dull, a safe choice she'd outgrown. Tonight, though, her words at the party had severed that illusion. Regret, nightmare. They weren't a slip. They were the truth she'd been harboring. I felt a hollow ache in my chest, but it was mingled with resolve. Love couldn't fix someone who saw you as a burden. I picked up my phone and dialed Clara Stone, a sharp divorce attorney I'd researched months ago, sensing the storm brewing, but hoping it would pass. "Clara, it's Jake Whitmore," I said when she answered, my voice steady despite the hour. "I need to move forward with a divorce, quickly and cleanly." She didn't miss a beat. Professional, as always. "All right, Jake. What's changed?" I played her a snippet of the recording from the party, Lana's voice clear and cutting. "I have evidence. Her words in front of witnesses. My assets are all separate. The house is in my name from before the marriage, and the company, she has no claim. No joint investments, no kids. I want out without dragging this through the mud." There was a pause as she noted details. "Smart to record it. Colorado's a no-fault state, but this strengthens your position if she contests. Do you want to counter with anything alimony demands or push for fault-based grounds?" I stared at the city skyline through the window, the lights twinkling like distant stars. No retaliation. I just want her to have the freedom she craves. Let her start over without me as her nightmare. Clara agreed to draft the papers first thing in the morning. As I hung up, a weight lifted not fully, but enough to breathe. I stood and began sorting through the few personal items Lana had left scattered in my life, even here in this hidden space. A scarf she'd forgotten once, a photo from our honeymoon tucked in a drawer. I packed them into a box, methodically, my movements deliberate. This wasn't anger. It was acceptance. For years, I'd chosen silence to keep her. Now I'd use it to set us both free. By dawn, the box was sealed, ready to be shipped. I sipped coffee, watching the sun rise over Denver's skyline, feeling the first stirrings of a new chapter. Lana would wake up thinking I'd come crawling back, as I always had. But this time she was wrong. 3 days had passed since the anniversary party, and the weight of those words still lingered in my mind like a shadow I couldn't shake. I'd spent the time at my downtown apartment finalizing details with Clara and making the necessary changes. The house, our house, though it had always been in my name from before we married now, had a new lock on the door. It was a simple act, but symbolic a barrier where there had once been open invitation. I didn't do it out of spite. It was practical, a clean break to match the one Lana had demanded with her cutting declaration. That afternoon, as the sun dipped low over Denver's skyline, I imagined Lana returning home from whatever errand or social outing she'd been on. She'd pull into the driveway, her designer bags in hand, expecting the door to yield as it always had. But when she tried her key, it wouldn't turn. I pictured the confusion on her face, the quick shift to irritation. My phone buzzed shortly after missed calls from her, then a text. "Where are you? I can't get in the house." I stared at the message for a moment, my thumb hovering over the screen. Then, with deliberate calm, I typed my response. "Lana, you said every day with me is a regret. I'm not forcing you to endure it anymore. The divorce papers are on their way. The house isn't ours. It's mine from before we married, with the paperwork to prove it. I'm not stopping you from starting over, but don't start over with what you called a nightmare." I hit send and set the phone down, feeling a quiet resolve settle in. No more explanations, no drawn-out arguments. She'd wanted freedom from me. Now she had it. It didn't take long for the fallout to begin. That evening, as I reviewed the divorce draft, Clara had emailed. My phone rang again, not Lana, but Evelyn. I let it go to voicemail, but curiosity got the better of me. Her message was frantic. "Jake, what's going on? Lana's here, hysterical. She says you locked her out and sent some message about divorce. Please call me back. This must be a misunderstanding." I didn't call back right away. Instead, I pictured the scene at the Carters' sprawling home in the suburbs, Lana storming in tears, streaming, recounting the story with her dramatic flair. Thomas would be pacing, his face red with indignation. "How dare he kick my daughter out?" he'd thunder, slamming a fist on the table. Evelyn, ever the peacemaker, would try to calm things, but her voice would waver. When I finally called Evelyn the next morning, her tone was a mix of worry and accusation. "Jake, explain this. Lana's devastated. She says you changed the locks and are filing for divorce over what she said at the party." I kept my voice even. "Evelyn, she called our marriage a nightmare in front of everyone. A regret every day. I'm giving her what she wants, an end to it." There was a pause, then Thomas's voice boomed in the background, grabbing the phone. "You listen here, Jake. That's my daughter you're talking about. You can't just throw her out like trash." "I didn't throw her out, Thomas," I replied calmly. "The house is mine, legally, and after what she said, I think it's best we part ways cleanly." He sputtered, but Evelyn took the phone back. "Jake, did you record it? Lana mentioned something about that." "Yes," I said simply. "But this isn't about revenge. It's about respecting her words." The call ended awkwardly, with Evelyn promising to talk to Lana. I hung up, feeling a pang not for them, but for the family I'd once tried so hard to fit into. Thomas had always seen me as beneath them, a steady but unremarkable addition to their polished world. Evelyn had been kinder, but even she had her blind spots. A week later, Clara confirmed the papers had been served. Lana received them at her parents' house, where she'd been staying. The document was straightforward. No alimony, no asset division beyond what was already separate. The house mine. Supply logic. Entirely my premarital property with no joint contributions from her. We had no children, no shared debts beyond the basics I'd already settled. She walked away with her personal belongings, her inheritance from her family, and nothing more from me. I imagined her reaction, flipping through the pages, her face paling as the reality sank in. No cushy settlement, no claim to the life she dismissed as a burden. Clara had included a note from me, brief and final. "You deserve the freedom you asked for." Memories flooded back as I packed the last of her things from the house items I'd delivered to her parents' address. I recalled a night a year ago, after a rough day at her job, when I'd surprised her with a bouquet of roses. She'd laughed not warmly, but dismissively. "Jake Flowers, you think that's what I need? I need excitement, not this routine." I'd brushed it off, then telling myself it was stress. But now I saw it for what it was, her growing contempt for the man who chose stability over flash. She didn't want roses, she wanted a world without the nightmare of me. As the days blurred, I focused on work, finalizing the real estate deal, expanding Supply Logic's reach. Lana tried calling a few more times, her voicemails shifting from angry to pleading. "Jake, this is ridiculous. Let's talk." I didn't respond. The door was closed, and for the first time in years I felt the space to breathe on the other side. A month had slipped by since I'd served the divorce papers, and Denver's crisp autumn air had turned sharper, carrying the promise of winter. I'd thrown myself into work, channeling the quiet energy of finality into expanding Supply Logic. The real estate deal was closing smoothly, and I'd just committed $10 million to a scholarship fund for underprivileged tech students at Colorado State University, a project I'd been nurturing in secret for years. It felt right away to give back without the fanfare Lana's world thrived on. I didn't think much about her anymore. The ache had dulled to a faint echo replaced by the rhythm of my new routine. But echoes have a way of resurfacing. One afternoon, as I sat in my apartment reviewing investor reports, my phone buzzed with a text from Lana. "I saw the article in Tech Frontier. I had no idea you'd come this far. I'm sorry." I stared at the screen, the words hanging there like an unwelcome ghost. Tech Frontier had run a profile on me that morning. Supply Logic founder Jake Whitmore invests $10 million in tech scholarships for underserved youth. There I was, in the photo, in a Navy suit, shaking hands with the university president, a confident smile on my face that felt genuine for the first time in months. She'd seen it probably scrolling through her feed expecting news of her social circle, only to stumble on the truth she'd never bothered to uncover. I didn't reply. What was there to say? Apologies couldn't undo the years of her subtle dismissals, the way she'd laughed off my efforts as cute or routine. I remembered a particular evening about 2 years into our marriage when I'd come home exhausted from a late-night coding session for Supply Logic. I'd surprised her with a simple gift, a custom app I'd built to track her travel plans, something practical to make her life easier. She'd glanced at it, chuckled dismissively. "Jake, an app? That's sweet, but I need more than tech toys. I need adventure." I'd swallowed the hurt, telling myself it was just her way, but now I saw it clearly. She hadn't valued the man behind the gestures, only what they lacked in her eyes. Instead of responding, I forwarded her message to Clara with a note. "Handle this. No more direct contact." Clara was efficient as ever. By the next day, she drafted and sent a formal letter on my behalf. I didn't see the final version until she copied me professional detached, "Dear Ms. Carter. My client requests that I respond to your recent message. He respectfully declines any further personal communication. He fulfilled his role in the marriage with sincerity, but has no ongoing obligations to maintain emotional ties." At the bottom, in my own handwriting, I'd added a single line. "When you saw me as the one making you regret every day, I realized I wasn't worth keeping in your life anymore." I heard through a mutual acquaintance, a former colleague who'd reached out about a potential partnership that Lana was struggling to adjust. She'd rented a small apartment downtown, nothing like the spacious home we'd shared, and taken a part-time administrative job at a local high school. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady ironic, considering how she'd once mocked my boring stability. The acquaintance mentioned she'd looked worn. Her usual spark dimmed, as if the weight of her words had finally caught up. She'd tried reaching out through friends, asking if I'd reconsider if there was a way to talk. But I'd already severed those ties, blocking numbers and politely declining any relayed messages. "Tell her it's done," I'd said once, and that was that. One evening, as I walked through downtown Denver after a meeting, I spotted her by chance, or perhaps fate's cruel twist. She was at a corner cafe sitting alone at an outdoor table, nursing a coffee and staring at her phone. Our eyes met briefly through the passing crowd. She froze recognition flashing across her face. For a split second, I saw the old Lana, the one who'd once looked at me with affection, but it was gone, replaced by something raw, vulnerable. She stood as if to approach, but I kept walking my pace unchanged. No words, no acknowledgement. What was left to say, she'd wanted out of the nightmare. I'd given it to her. That encounter lingered with me as I prepared for my move to Seattle. Boxes piled up in the apartment filled with blueprints and files for the new startup incubator I planned to launch there, a space for young engineers to build without the burdens I'd faced. It was exciting, a fresh start untainted by the past. I didn't hate Lana. I pitied the version of her that had chosen contempt over curiosity. She'd never asked about my late nights, my investments, my dreams. In her eyes, I was the dull husband, the one holding her back. Now she knew the truth. I was the one who'd chosen silence not out of weakness, but strength enough to walk away when it mattered. As the days ticked down to my departure, I felt a profound lightness. The divorce was finalizing smoothly, no contests, no drama beyond her initial shock. Claire assured me it would be over soon. Lana's attempts at contact had faded. Perhaps she'd accepted it, or maybe the reality had sunk in deeper than she let on. Either way, it was no longer my concern. I'd built my life in the quiet spaces she never explored, and now I was ready to step fully into it. 6 months had flown by since the divorce finalized, and I'd settled into my new life in Seattle with a rhythm that felt both liberating and purposeful. The move had been seamless, boxes unpacked in a modern loft overlooking Puget Sound, where the misty mornings and vibrant tech scene energized me. I'd poured my focus into launching the incubator for young engineers, a sleek space in the heart of the city, equipped with state-of-the-art labs and mentorship programs. It wasn't just a business venture. It was my way of paying forward the quiet struggles I'd faced early on building Supply Logic, from late-night coding sessions in a cramped Denver apartment. The scholarship fund had already awarded its first grants, and seeing the gratitude in those students' eyes reminded me why I'd kept my successes hidden for so long, not out of fear, but to build something real untainted by expectations. Life here was solitary, but fulfilling. I worked 10 hours a day, often more, but now with a sense of freedom I'd forgotten existed. No more tiptoeing around Lana's moods or her family's subtle judgments. Evenings were mine runs along the waterfront, coffee with new colleagues, or quiet dinners reading industry reports. In one interview for a local tech podcast, the host asked about my personal life, probing gently. "You've achieved so much professionally, what about on the home front?" I paused, choosing my words carefully. "I was in a marriage I thought would last forever," I said. "But forever isn't just about feelings, it's about respect. When that's gone, love can't hold it together." I didn't name Lana, didn't delve into details. Then, too, the past was a closed chapter, and I had no interest in reopening it for public scrutiny. News from Denver trickled in sporadically, mostly through old acquaintances or LinkedIn updates. Lana had stayed in her small apartment working that administrative job at the high school. From what I gathered, it was steady but unremarkable, a far cry from the glamorous life she'd chased. One mutual friend mentioned she'd withdrawn from her social circle, skipping the brunches and trips that once defined her. "She seems quieter," the friend had said. I didn't probe. It wasn't my place anymore, but I could imagine her days clocking in at a desk cluttered with paperwork, handling routine tasks that mirrored the boring life she'd once mocked in me. No lavish vacations, no endless shopping sprees funded by her family's dwindling influence. Thomas's real estate ventures had hit a rough patch, or so I'd heard in passing. Then one crisp Seattle evening, as I scrolled through old photos while sorting digital files, I stumbled on one from our honeymoon, me carrying Lana across a sun-drenched beach, her head thrown back in laughter, my eyes fixed on her like she was the center of my universe. I stared at it for a long moment, feeling a faint tug. Not regret, but a quiet acknowledgement of what had been. She'd been vibrant then, full of dreams we'd shared. But somewhere along the way, those dreams diverged, hers toward excitement and status, mine toward building something lasting. I deleted the photo, not out of bitterness, but closure. A week later, during a coffee break at the incubator, a young intern casually mentioned a recent article about community education projects in Denver. "Hey, Jake, isn't this the kind of thing you're into? Some admin at a high school there is pushing for tech workshops." I glanced at the link she shared, and there was Lana featured in a small local piece organizing a basic coding class for students. Her photo showed a subdued version of the woman I'd known, hair pulled back, simply a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. The article quoted her, "I've learned that real value comes from steady effort, not flash." I set the phone down, a mix of emotions, stirring pity perhaps, or just indifference. She'd found her own path as I'd found mine. In quiet moments, I reflected on the irony. She'd called me the source of her daily regrets, the nightmare she wanted to escape. But in leaving, I'd given her exactly that escape, only for her to discover that the real nightmare might be facing a life without the foundation I'd provided. I didn't gloat. There was no satisfaction in her struggles. If anything, it reinforced what I'd learned: respect is the bedrock of any relationship, more vital than passion or promises. Now, as I stood on my balcony watching the ferries glide across the Sound, I felt at peace. Seattle was my fresh start, filled with potential collaborations and the hum of innovation. Lana's regrets were her own to carry. Mine had faded into lessons that strengthened me. Life moved forward, and for the first time, I was truly awake to it. Not as someone's regret, but as my own man.